A couple of chapters ago, we added positionmover.rb to our lib directory, and I told you then that the lib directory is a great place to put small feature enhancements and code you might want to reuse in other applications. Well, that works well for simple code with a single developer, but it isn't really enough for complex functionality or for sharing code with other developers. And there are a lot of benefits for everyone when we can effectively share code among the open source community. So to help us share code, we have plugins and Ruby gems. A plugin is that same code that you might have put into your lib directory, but with a tiny bit of extra code added so that it can live in the plugins directory and be loaded by Rails at the right time. Plugins are going to be stored in your application inside the vendor plugins directory. Most plugins help you organize your shared code into packages of features. And storing them apart from your personal code that lives in lib makes it clear that it comes from third-party sources, meaning vendors and other developers. Now, Ruby gems, or just gems for short, is that same code, but this time with more code added around it. And this extra code allows gems to be maintained by the Ruby Gems package manager, which makes it super simple to find, install, uninstall, update, even keep multiple versions of a gem around. If a gem needs other gems to do its job, well, it'll download those too. It even allows code to be compiled after downloading to match your specific hardware and operating system. If you'll remember, we used Ruby gems in the installation chapter to install Ruby on Rails. Ruby on Rails is a gem. Installing it was as easy as gem install Rails. Now, gems aren't usually stored in the applications folder, though they can be. Instead, they live in a hidden away folder that the Ruby Gems package manager maintains for you. Rails will talk to Ruby gems to load the gems and give you access to them when it starts up, just as if they were in your application folders. The great thing about doing it this way is that then all your Rails applications can use those gems because they're located in a central repository. Now, Ruby gems comes out of the Ruby community, so Ruby gems don't have to be Rails specific. In fact, Ruby gems have been around longer than Rails. In the early years of Rails, Ruby features and code that needed compiling were most often packaged as gems, while Rails features were more likely to be plugins. But over the last year or two, there's been a definite shift in the Rails community away from using plugins and towards using gems exclusively. It's become easier to create gems, to share them, and to manage an application's gem requirements. Many developers are packaging their code now so that it can actually work as either a gem or a plugin, leading some to refer to them as gem plugins or just simply plugins, even when we're talking about using it as a gem. So don't get confused because the lines are beginning to get a little blurry. The distinction is mostly in how you install them and where they're going to be stored. My advice is to always try and use the gem version of something if it's available. So where can you find plugins and gems, and how can you install them? Gems can be installed from the command line with gem install gemname. Ruby gems will connect to the rubygems.org server and download and install the latest version of the gem to your computer. Of course, you need to know the name to be able to do that, so you can also visit rubygems.org in your browser and search for the gem you want or browse through a list of their gems. And if you need help, you can just type gem help from the command line and it'll show you the documentation for Ruby gems. Now, plugins can be installed from the command line too, from the root of your Rails application. And you type Rails plugin install and then either the plugin name or the URL where that plugin is located. If you just type a name, it will try to find that plugin at dev.rubyonrails.com inside their plugins directory. You can go there in a browser to see the full list. It doesn't have a lot, but a few of them are very useful. And because that's a very short list of official Rails plugins, it's become more common to actually use a URL to specify where a plugin is located instead of just calling it by name. If you need help, Rails plugin install will show you a documentation help page. Now, a lot of gems and plugins also can be found in two other places you should know about. GitHub at github.com is a popular location for hosting source code for Rails projects, and you can search GitHub for code and then follow their installation instructions. It should tell you if you should install it as a gem or a plugin. Rails plugins at railsplugins.org is a searchable directory of gems and plugins. Most importantly, it includes information about compatibility. So if you want to know if a certain gem is compatible with Rails 3.0, well, this should tell you. Now, to get you started, here's a list of popular plugins. These are sorted roughly by my guess as to their popularity. They're all well supported and well documented. The first half dozen or so get used in almost every Rails project that I work on. So you can look up more information about these and find out if they might be right for you. If you decide to incorporate plugins to your project, then you'll also want to know more about Bundler, which is what we'll look at in the next movie.